Hey, I want to welcome our viewers to the first ever to have a comedian on the show. Now, I'm not putting any pressure on you, Vinny, but you're coming over to Overture on the 20th of November. So we wanted to do a little promoting and just talk about, laughing when you're older is kind of more special than laughing when you're younger. So we appreciate. I don't know how you came about, but we'll learn when we start talking. So, Benny,
Sure.
just introduce yourself, who you're with, and who you serve, and then we'll let our viewers hear from you.
Absolutely. My name is Vinny Bucci. I've been a comedian in Atlanta for about 17 years. I've also been in radio. I also used to work for the regular guys on Rock 100.5 for 4 years. That's how most people in Atlanta know who I am. I did 2 seasons of a show on Adult Swim called Daytime Fighting League. So Adult Swim fans had a good run there. I've also worked in wrestling. I've been a commentator, an announcer, a manager. Buff Bagwell and I are actually really good friends. We've worked together a few times. So if you go on Fight TV, you've seen me on there somewhere.
Good.
I did a documentary on Amazon Prime. It's on YouTube now, but it was on Amazon for a while. It was called Booch in the Car, where for 2 years I actually attempted to eat a car and documented the whole experience. So that was kind of a
Oh,
fun thing I did there. And then the only other credit I have is on HBO Max. I did one episode of Doom Patrol. If you watch the fifth episode of the first season,
uh-huh.
there's a scene where you see Crazy Jane in the bar and she's dancing around going
Right.
crazy. You see me in the bar. Like literally, there's a moment where I'm dancing and she gets hit in the back of the head by a cop, and I'm one of the punk rock guys that tries to save her from the cops when they club her in the back of the head. So
Dang,
I
that's
had a few
good.
fun moments there.
Yes. So, our viewers always like to know, like, at what point did you say, you know what, I like the comedy path. I want to go in that direction. What point was that in your career?
I realized in high school was when I really seriously wanted to do it. I mean, I've always made people laugh, always had a personality, but never really thought much about it as far as making a living. And growing up, I was a huge fan of Dice. Andrew Dice Clay was a popular comic I used to enjoy.
Mhm.
Robin Williams was another. And right around high school is when I really became a fan of comedy because before a long time, Dice was the only stand up that I knew. Like
Right.
obviously I'd heard of Robin Williams and Eddie Murphy and Jim Carrey and Martin Lawrence, but I only knew them as actors
Right.
because they stopped doing stand up for like half my life. Then one day in 2002, Robin Williams is coming out with a special out of nowhere. Martin Lawrence coming out with a special out of nowhere. Comedy Central's ranking top comics. I'm like, wait a minute, these guys were stand-ups too? And I start researching it, and I'm like, oh my god, this is a lot of fun. And then one day, I was working on a report for school, and my brother is in another room, and he's laughing. And my brother's one of those people, he's a hard laugh. Like
Mhm.
he's one of the, like some people can just laugh at anything. My brother, if you make him laugh, you're a funny guy.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering what the hell he's laughing at. And he goes, dude, you gotta come in here. There's a guy on stage pretending to be a snake. I'm like, what the hell? So I walk in and it was Dane Cook and his Comedy Central Presents.
Okay.
And I saw that and I was mesmerized because he was the first comic I actually like where he told relatable material that I at my age could relate to. Because all the other comics talking about marriage and kids and stuff, and I'm like, I'm 16, I'm like 17 years old. I'm not.
Yeah.
That comedy doesn't appeal to you when you're a teenager. When you're an adult, it's hilarious. But as a teenager, that's hard to relate to. So Dane was kind of the guy I gravitated towards, and I saw all the success that he was getting, and he kind of
Mhm.
made it possible. And I was like, you know what? Let me give this a shot. So in 2006, I went to Eddie's Attic in Decatur, Georgia. There was somebody there doing a show because I was trying to get into the other clubs, but they wouldn't let me in because I was 19. So the lady had this flyer outside the club, handed it to me. I went and did a set, did very well, did okay, and then since then it just kind of built from there, where I was going to different open mics and clubs and stuff, and
Mhm.
ultimately got to where I am now.
I love that. Like when people say back in high school, I kind of like it's almost like back in kindergarten when I was playing in the sandbox, I
Yeah.
realized that I didn't want to share my toys or whatever it is. So you have a golf hat on. I'm curious. Are you a golfer?
Um, I wouldn't say I'm a golfer. What happened was when I worked for the regular guys, we would do different events around Atlanta, and we had this regular guys mini golf tournament.
Hmm.
It was at a place near Wild Bill's. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but we were doing a big event there. So whenever there was a big event, as a comedian, I would overdress for
Right.
whatever the event was. Like we one time did a prison princess pageant. I dressed up as a cop,
Hmm.
or we did other things. So because we're doing a mini golf, I went to this golf store that was near my house. Now it's a clinic or whatever, but they were selling nothing but golf memorabilia. So I found a polo golf shirt, I got a
Right.
golf glove, and I found this cool Callaway hat. So I just started wearing that, and I came in so I could I look like I'm about to do 18 holes in the PGA Tour, but we're just
Yeah.
playing mini golf. So I did that for comedic purposes, and
Yeah.
the hat was just so cool. I just wear it all the time.
Well, it's a good looking hat. So, I mean, I tend to, I started out in golf and then I've
Yeah.
moved into the senior. But so let's talk, everybody has a COVID story. So when COVID hit, I know I have a fellow comedian, Ken Kington. So how did that affect your business when COVID hit?
It it affected it a little bit. At the time, I was still working in a day job while I was doing that. For example,
Mhm.
I was working at Lowe's at the time that
Mhm.
the pandemic hit, but I was also working as a social media manager for HVMA marketing. So it really affected the HVMA job because we were out of the office, and because I was new, I wasn't getting as many tasks as everybody else. So I wasn't making as much money. But Lowe's, because I was still there, I had a good check. So financially, I was okay.
Okay.
Mentally, no, because the customers were insane during that time and it was
Yep.
worse than ever. In fact, it was so bad that when the pandemic finally toned down, I finally left Lowe's and just went to HVMA full time once they opened the office back up. It was that stressful. But
Hmm.
as a comedian, it was kind of rough but at the time I was kind of going through um basically like a life-changing, what they call a come to Jesus moment, where I wasn't sure if I was going to continue doing comedy. And this was like in December 2019.
Okay.
So the pandemic kind of gave me time to reflect on whether or not I should even continue with comedy. And
Hmm.
obviously I arrived at the conclusion that I should, because HVMA was helpful. And, I just realized, I've put so much of my life into this. And even though the pandemic, affected me for as far as physical performance, I had so many things happen during that time. Like the docu series I was telling you about that was on Amazon Prime. It
Hmm.
originally aired on Adult Swim as a docu film, but we had an issue where Adult Swim didn't archive it, and it was shelved for like 18 months. So they aired it twice, but not a lot of people saw it. So
Hmm.
during that time when we were in the pandemic, the contract expired, so we got the rights back.
Hmm.
And my buddy Cole Casal, who was one of the directors, called me up and said, "Hey, I'm gonna put this on Amazon Prime. Let's promote this, see what happens." We revamped the whole thing, and it got high ratings. So while I'm on the pandemic, I have a show on Amazon Prime that
Yeah.
airs. A couple of the wrestling shows that I did ended up airing on Fight TV during that time as well. So I was not able to physically go on stage and perform in front of people, but I
Right.
had stuff coming out. So there was still exposure. There was still stuff coming in, and my name was still out there. So I was able to maintain it that way. And then by the time the pandemic slowed down and I could perform again, people knew who I was and I could get booked easier. So it actually
Right.
helped in that
Did
regard.
I started out well, I was into digital marketing before I had a stroke and I gave that up, but I started in social media. What what did the comedy background, how did that help you in social media when you were a social media manager?
It helped me become more creative, which is what my
Okay.
boss was specifically looking for. Like when he
Yeah.
interviewed me for the job, he saw that I had a degree, he saw that I did all these other things, but the comedian was what drew his attention.
Okay.
Comedians, we're very creative people. We're creating jokes, we're creating content, we're creating skits, we're doing a lot of different things. So he saw that as a way to create more content. So I could look at things a lot differently. I would try to find, is there a funny way to present this? Is there a creative way to present this situation? Like at one point, they wanted me to create a bunch of memes for a client. So my comedic brain just starts churning and I'm finding all this stuff, or I'll see
Mhm.
something funny in a video and go, oh, I can work with this. And the key thing is sometimes I would do stuff and my boss loved everything that I ever did. There
Mhm.
were some times where it was like, look, man, this is hilarious, but this is not really appropriate. So I got to kind of put it to the side, but I love it. So he was like,
Yeah.
he never once said that an idea was bad. He would just tell me it's not appropriate or not usable, and he put it to the side and then take the stuff I could use and we put that
Right.
out there. So that's where it helped me with social media was a lot of creativity and looking
Yeah.
at stuff from a perspective that most social media managers don't. Like even the most professional ones, they have a professional mindset, so the comedy part's not really there. For
Yeah.
me, it was all about creativity and then just having somebody who was a social media expert and educating me. That's why I like one of the things my boss asked me on my first year anniversary was, what's the big difference between now and then? And I said, when I first went to work for him, I thought I knew social media. I went and worked at that company and realized, oh, it's a whole nother ball game. I'm better at social media now than I was before I worked there.
Right. So what for our viewers out there, and a lot of them are seniors, but I'm always just curious, like what part of that developed into a better understanding of social media? What was the difference between a comic background and a person that comes in just with a creative background?
Well, you really look at it because you got to understand, like you learn more about analytics and about looking at a target audience and finding out,
Okay.
what works and what doesn't work based on likes, comments, and engagement. Some comedians, they put stuff out just to put it out. You're putting stuff out because I think this is funny. I'm going to put this out, which you should have in the beginning because you don't know
Yeah.
what's going to hit, and what's not going to hit. But some comedians will just keep going with the one mindset, even if it's not working, which at some point you got to look and go, okay, what are they gravitating towards more and try to focus more on that. And
Okay.
I think that's the difference is the comedian sometimes is they go for the funny so much, they don't think about the other side. And you got to think about the other side. You got to blend, you got to find the happy middle ground within both.
Yes, that makes sense. I mean, it really does. It's like know your audience. And so if you're just like here, people will say, like, I watched this movie, a younger person that works. I watched this movie and I thought you guys would like it. Well, you're 23, we're over 65. There's a difference in what we like and what you like. So knowing your audience is important. So what would you say, like, how does a person in your shoes go through that creative process for content and material? What is that like?
Um, it's a lot of thinking and a lot of trial and error. Like really, it's me just trying to figure out, okay, how do I sometimes think, okay, like what is my audience looking into? And it's based on when I look at my target audience, it's based on a lot of stuff that I do. For example, outside of comedy, my big thing is wrestling. I have a podcast where I talk wrestling. We talk about other stuff too, but it's mostly wrestling because
Yeah.
that was my biggest passion as a kid. Like at one point, I did think about becoming a professional wrestler. Realized right away that wasn't going to happen. In fact, the regular guys actually made me go. Actually, when I was talking about wrestling, there was this guy Ted Guinness who worked for the Underground School of Pro Wrestling in McDonough, Georgia, which was affiliated with Deep South at the time. And they called the radio station and invited me to come down and do a training day with them. And they put me through the ringer. This video
Really?
exists on my YouTube channel. Booch Goes to Wrestling School. It exists. And
Yeah.
I learned how to take bumps. I learned how to run the ropes. I was doing the up and over, which was I couldn't get my legs up. Like I didn't realize how out of shape I was till
Right.
I did that. Because when I was a high school wrestler, I was in incredible shape. Like if I was in high school, I could have did that in my sleep. But when you're in your 20s and you haven't worked out in a long time and you've kind of let yourself go, which I was at the time, yeah, I was not prepared. So it made for funny content, and people loved it. And I did see some of those people years later, like the girl in the video who teaches me how to take a bump. I later worked a wrestling show with her when I was ring announcing. So we kind of
Oh.
reconnected again through that. Her name was Tracy Taylor. So we had a great experience there. So really, it was about. So I tend to look at things that are more gravitated towards wrestling. I
Okay.
also try to do things where I'm ranting because a lot of times when I'm angry about something, I'll go on an epic rant. And that's where I learned a lot of people are entertained by that because I'll be angry about something, like legit angry, and I'm going
Right.
off. But the stuff I'm saying is making everyone around me laugh. So
Okay.
they think it's funny. I'm not laughing because I'm actually angry. But then I found, okay, this works. Cause I'll say something funny in the midst of the rant about how stupid is this person? Like, seriously, how do you dress yourself in the morning? And people start laughing at the dress yourself part.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, I'm legit saying, how do you dress yourself, you moron? And
Yeah.
so I would go, so I'm like, okay, they like the rants. So I'll put rants in there too. So I literally, in fact, when I worked for HVMA, I did a show called Complain Time. And he would basically tell me, pick a topic and just rant. And I would literally do, and I made like a bunch of videos there every week. I was coming out with a video and I would just pick a topic and go off, and it got hits and people loved it. And once I left HVMA, I got permission from my boss to repurpose that material and put it on my YouTube channels. I put a couple of those up. I did one for Halloween where I condensed a rant about people who get offended over Halloween, and it started getting hits and people were loving it because I was just ripping apart people who rip apart Halloween.
Yeah. That's interesting, and I'll say this because we do seniors in the non-golf area, and I think it's a market that really appreciates a lot of things, but is underserved. So what were you thinking, like coming and speaking to Overture? I think it's brilliant, but because our residents have kids, and they tell their kids about what's going on. So what was the thought? Is Overture unique, or have you done some other senior centers?
I've only done one other senior center in my whole career. And
really?
It was in South Carolina. That show was relatively fun. I was in the assisted living. They have an independent section and the assisted living section. They put me in the assisted living section, which they didn't tell me that's where I was going.
Yeah.
So I was doing a lot of bits, but I found out later some of my jokes were more toward the independent section. So I had to regroup on the fly. And there were some people that were laughing. There was this one lady in the front row. They called her Sassy Sally. And she was just not there for comedy. She was one of those people that was just like, she's like, because you see some senior citizens, and I've learned this, some of them are very happy and excited and full of life, regardless of whether they need assisted living or not. And then you got some people that are just cranky no matter what. And I'm sure in Overture, you maybe have a couple of people that are like, you know what? You stay away from that particular person because no matter how much you try to be nice to them, they're just crabby for no reason.
Yes.
Sally was crabby for no reason. No matter what I said, no matter what I did, she was not going to laugh. She didn't find anything funny. And at one point, I should have asked in the beginning, am I allowed to cuss on this thing or no?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You
okay.
Let it rip.
I only asked so at one point, apparently she had to go to the bathroom. And the reason I know this is because in the middle of the set, she's trying to leave, but the guy doesn't want her to leave. And in the back of my mind, I'm like, look, if an audience member wants to go, let them go. Because if they're going to sit there and disrupt the show, it's not going to be fun. And it's a professional show. So even though this lady's heckling me, I have to find creative ways to work around it, as opposed to like in a comedy club where I can just insult the person. Here, you can't really do that. So I would just laugh and find ways to work around it. And at one point, she actually says, if I don't get out of here right now, I'm going to shit my britches. And she's in a wheelchair. So at that point, I look at the guy and I kind of look at each other and it's like, okay, now I got to get her out of here. And there's no way to get her out of there except to wheel her right past me. So I'm here doing my jokes. She's wheeling right past me. And she just screamed, I'm going to shit my britches. And I'm like, I don't know what to say here. So again, it's one of those moments where I got to think on the fly. And all I could think of to say in that moment was, I said, I've never heard of people. I'm trying to remember exactly what I said, but I think it was something along the lines of, usually when you hear people say they're going to laugh till they wet themselves, it's usually the other way or something like that, where, usually they pee themselves. It's the first time I've ever made someone shit themselves and they start laughing because it was all I could think of to say. And I got to laugh and it got her out of there. And then I finished the show and everybody else had a great time. So that was my first experience doing a senior facility. And then for this show, what I do is normally I have this site called Thumbtack that I use. What mostly a lot of independent contractors use it, entertainers use it.
Yep.
Actual builders, contractors, plumbers, they use it to get work, and you get leads from people and you can reach out. So that's where the majority of my bookings came from. And this lady, I think her name was Fedora. She was the one who reached out to me and asked me to be part of the show. So we had booked a date and everything was set up. And then I got a call from Chastity. Come to find out that I don't know where there was a miscommunication, but they didn't put it on the calendar for whatever reason. So she said, "Hey, we want people to know you're coming." So that's when we rescheduled it for the 20th. So I was originally supposed to come in October, but
Okay.
I was originally supposed to come in October, but we had a miscommunication somewhere, and I'm not saying anything bad. I'm just saying what happened.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a reality. I mean,
Yeah, like I said, I wasn't angry. Things happen, mistakes
yeah.
happen. We were able to set the date. So they said, "Hey, can you come on the 20th?" And I looked at my schedule and said, "Absolutely, I'm open." So that's how we set everything up to come to Overture.
That's cool because I was sharing with a president here. I said, yeah, I noticed, I think I told you like yesterday, I was down there and I was flipping through the book and I saw comedy and I was going like, really? I mean, because we don't, bingo is the big thing over here, not comedy. Now, when friends know that I moved into this place, I always tell them it's front row comedy because seniors are absolutely, just like you said about shitting in your britches and stuff. It is nonstop when you kind of dial into the subtle humor. And when I go home and they say, "Well, Pete, tell me some of your stories," and I'll tell them some of the stories, and you can't make this stuff up because you don't find it in other places because the average age here, I don't know if they told you, is 78.
78,
so
okay.
It's a little bit more than the 55. And I thought, okay, 55, I needed a walk-in shower. So there was nothing in Kennesaw because it's KSU dominates the apartment scene.
Yeah.
And so when I first moved in there, I'm a golfer and I'm asking this guy like, "Hey, are you a golfer?" And he's just totally ignoring me, not even saying the thing. And I'm going like, wow, that's not very friendly. Well, he hadn't put his hearing aids in. And so he didn't hear me. So the lady behind him says, "Jim, he doesn't have his hearing aids in." I mean, that was my first first exposure to senior living in the place where I bet you about 80% of the people have hearing aids in this place. And so, you adapt to an environment that actually is funny because, everybody, a community of people that are 78, they're still like active. They're not like, assisted living. So there is a lot going on. So what would you say? Like, I'm always curious, like you said, because there was requests. They asked us requests and somebody said, we want a comedian. We want a comedian. So coming here, like, how long's your show going to be? Like,
well, as far as I know, unless it changes, I believe I'm doing about an hour around there.
Okay.
Because that was like the deal that I made originally.
Yeah.
So we said it was going to be about an hour. We agreed on the price and everything.
Yeah.
So we kind of set that up. So usually I do about an hour, unless otherwise requested. Like sometimes I've done 30-minute shows. Sometimes I've done 100. Like I remember, last month I had a show where they had booked me to do an hour and they paid me X amount of money. And then at the last second, they had, because there was so much stuff going on, it was at a high school reunion, they had to change it to 30 minutes.
Uh-huh.
And they said, "But don't worry, you're still going to get the rate that we agreed upon." So I was like, okay. Right. So I was like, all right. That's why when they said 30 minutes, the only thing I got nervous about, and that's when I learned I was a professional comedian.
Like, okay, you're only going to be speaking for 30. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know. And that's when I learned I was a professional comedian in that moment. Like I had that epiphany because most comedians, if you hear their times getting cut in half, they're upset about it.
Yeah.
When I heard I was only going to do 30 minutes, my first thought was they're not cutting my set in half. I thought, are you cutting my rate in half?
Yeah.
And that was what I.
Yeah.
And so, but when they said, "No, you'll still get the full rate, we just had to change it to 30 minutes. I'm like, cool, 30 minutes, no problem. Like, that's what I knew. That's how you know a professional. That's how you separate a professional comedian from an unprofessional comedian. The guy who doesn't get paid a lot is going to be upset about the time. A professional comedian is going to be like, make sure, hey, do I still get paid the same?
I mean, your time is your living. I mean, it's like people, for sure. What would you say, like, say the average age is 78. What do you come into our facility thinking about? Do you have like the first 5 jokes already kind of done, then you play off the crowd? How does that work?
Usually I have the hour set that I want to do.
Okay.
And sometimes something happens, I'll play off the crowd if something cool happens, and I kind of leave room for spontaneity, but I always have the set list to go back to.
Really?
I do. Yeah, because that's usually what I do. Because I'm one of those people where like and if I do leave room for spontaneity, I have like a sheet, I have like pieces of paper next to me because my brain works so many different ways. If I interact with the crowd, I'll forget where I am. So I
Right.
use like I'll sometimes look at the paper and go, okay, that's where I was at, and then segue back into what I was going to say. So
Okay.
sometimes something will happen in the crowd, and I'll play off of that to have fun. But I
Yeah.
do have the set list to go to just in case, because you might have a crowd that's not active back. Not that I'm saying you guys wouldn't be. I'm just
Yeah.
saying I'm always prepared for that assessment. So and that's how most comedians should be. Like I'm all for interacting with the crowd if something happens. Like with Sassy Sally, I had to play off of her a little bit to
Yeah.
have some fun. And sometimes I'll throw in some stuff that I'm thinking about or whatever. And I have ways to like make it as spontaneous, but I do have the set list that I
That
go
was
to
that.
that I've, been working on. And a lot of it is, stories about me. Like
Yeah.
I'm very much a storyteller in my material. So
Right.
like I tell stories about working in retail. I've told stories about relationships and stuff. And, that stuff gravitated over time. Cause when I
Right.
first started, I was 19. So my whole act was about being in college because that was all the life experience I had at
Right.
19. I was not, and some people are talking about like, other comedians talk about marriage and kids. Well, I'm not married. I don't have kids. So if I try to tell that to an audience of people who've been married for X amount of years, you're going to see right through that. You're going to know
Right.
I don't know what I'm talking about. Now at 36, I've never been married. I don't have kids, but I've been in enough relationships where I can say something and you'll kind of go, yeah, he sees what he's talking about. So because like as my life got different, my material grew with it. And that's
Yeah.
kind of where I was at. I didn't talk about more serious adult stuff until I became a more serious adult.
That's cool to know because you're right about you try to live in the time frame that you're in. What like when you're not performing and doing comedy, what do you like to do for fun?
Usually I'm just like I hang out. Like I said, I watch a lot of wrestling. I hang out with my friends.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm, just usually I'm such a content creating machine. It's hard. It's hard for me to have free time. In fact, I have that's why I have like the Booch 365 thing that I wear
Yeah.
here. It's I wanted to have my own version of like Austin 316 because I'm a huge wrestling fan. And
Yeah.
I couldn't come up with a number. So I'm like, I can't do 316. WWE will sue me. I
Right.
can't do 24/7. A wrestler already did that. I would do 420, but I don't smoke a lot of weed. Plus, my friend who has that smoked a lot of weed, so he pretty much has that covered. So I was like, what can I do? And
Yeah.
I did 365 because it represents 365 days in a year. Because between
Right.
wrestling and podcasting and content creating, days off are very rare for me. So I'm usually
Gotcha.
working around the clock. But when I do have free time, I hang out with friends. I watch, I watch TV. I try to decompress. Like try to
Mhm.
like a lot of times I'll just put movies on just so I like to do things on my downtime that don't where I don't have to think
Right.
basically and just shut my brain off. Because I remember like my mom used to be that. My mom is that way. Like sometimes I would come home from school and she'd be watching Project Runway, and I'm like, "Do you even like this show?" And she's like, "Not really." I go, "Why do you watch it?" She goes, "Vinny, I'm an educator. I have to use my brain 24/7. I need to watch trashy reality TV just to shut my brain down." So she'll watch bad reality TV, not even for the entertainment, just so she doesn't have to think for 20 minutes. Because
Yes.
if you're thinking while watching reality TV, I don't know something's wrong with you.
Yeah.
You should have-
No, I totally agree.
So
That makes sense. And, the old thing is like, when you're remove yourself from your creative time, it has to be a chance for your brain to kind of relax. What would you say? My friend would tell me a little bit um, when cancel culture, like maybe a year ago, was really hitting hard, and they hit the comedy people real hard because of just whatever sensitive drug jokes. Did you feel it at your position? Did you feel like you had to rein in some of your comedy based on the time frame of what was going on?
in some cases yes, in some cases no. Like I said, I was very much a like a storyteller and stuff. So even
Yeah.
though I'm very much a free speech advocate, I my jokes have never really been offensive in that kind of way. Like the most like I mean I did like I'm most of my jokes you can tell are rooted in truth. Like and I've had jokes where very seldom anyone got offended. Like I think the closest thing I ever get, and this is probably one joke you'll hear at on the show, is when I talked about working at Lowe's and Home Depot. my boss would always put me in the garden center. And I didn't like it because I know nothing about gardening. I am not a garden expert. Like I can help the customer with the register. I can ring your stuff up. But if you ask me a garden related question, I do not have the answer. I
Right.
just don't know. And one of the jokes I told about, and it's a 100% true story, is the names that the plants have. And some of them are normal, but a lot of them are very controversial when you think about it.
Yeah.
And this lady wanted to help find a plant, and the name of the plant was called Wandering Jew, which is an actual plant. It's called Wandering Jew. So the lady came up to me and said, where can I find the Wandering Jews? And it was my first day on the job, so I had no idea what she was talking about.
Yeah.
So the first words, so all I could think of to say was, I said, well, ma'am, have you tried the desert? And, and she said, and she goes, how long did it take to grow? I said, about 40 years, give or take. And crowds laugh at that. So that's the closest thing to an offensive joke that I have.
Yeah.
But most people understand it's not offensive because the content of the joke is it's a real name for a plant.
Yeah, exactly.
But also, it talks about the Jews wandering through the desert for 40 years, which is a story that we all know. So I'm not making anything up that's not true. I'm telling an actual story so I can get away with that joke because of the historical context. Like I don't really like political stuff I tend to stay away from because that's not really a humor thing for me.
Right.
I might throw a couple things in there. Like I tried when I was in the early years, but even back then, my political jokes weren't that controversial anyway. Like the last political joke I did was I did two of them. One was people asked like, what do you think about Obama? I said, well, I think he's a jackass. And people would groan because there were some Democrats in the crowd. They said, well, why do you think he's a jackass? I said, well, they're a Democrat. Their mascot's the donkey. You do the math. So you would get that. So again, they would get the laugh because they would think donkey, jackass. So it was a way to call Obama a jackass without getting in trouble.
Right.
And then I could say like one time I did a joke. This one's really bad. But I don't tell it anymore. But I said, I found it funny and ironic. There was a Republican in office during 9/11 because their mascot is the elephant. As we all know, an elephant never forgets. So that one got a little bit of a laugh, but wasn't quite as good. So I've done those are my closest thing to political jokes that I tried to do. So I don't really tell those anymore.
Well, it's good to know that, and I've never really asked my friend Ken, because I've gone to a bunch of his shows, that how he prepares for, a different show. And it sounds like you guys have it all laid out. So, it's not like, well, I don't know what I'm going to say now. You laid out your whole presentation, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So is that pretty typical of all comedians, or some of them just wing it?
There are a few comedians that wing it, but most of them are prepared.
Okay.
Regardless, like a lot of them have like the prepared set list that they do because they do have to fill the time. But some comedians like a Dane Cook or a Robin or a late Robin Williams, they would leave room for improv and spontaneity. Like if something happens, they'll Robin would play off of things every time it happened. Like one time he dropped a water bottle, so he just started doing like a prayer and saying, the union people are going, don't touch it, Mr. Williams. Or sometimes he would flub a word. Like one time he was trying to say frogs' backs, and he was like, blah, 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 and he goes, thank you for watching me this far. Obviously, I did inhale, and then go back into his joke. So they leave room for the improv to help involve the audience, but you always have the jokes to go back to. So you have so for the most part, that's how it's all like, laid out. And then and again, to go elaborate more on the cancel culture thing, like it got crazy for a while, but I think what ultimately has helped it die down a little bit is the fact that it got too out of control to where even people who supported the cancel culture were like, all right, this is too crazy even for me. Like once it becomes too extreme to the point where even your biggest supporters are kind of like walking away because they're seeing your nuts, that's kind of where it went. And it just got to a point where, because my big thing with comedy, what drew me the most to comedy, in addition to being a funny guy, was I felt it was the last bastion of free speech left on the planet. Because everything else has become so politically correct. Even when I was in college, I had this mindset. Because that's where it started like really like bubbling. Like it wasn't as bad, but it wasn't where it is now, where it got to an insane point where everybody's offended over everything. And even like there are some jokes that people have told that I've heard that were in bad taste, and I can admit it. Like there's some, but in general, there are some jokes where it's like, look, this clearly there was no malicious intent here. Like that's pretty much my thing when I hear like someone tell an offensive joke. Was there malicious intent?
Yeah.
Was there an attempt to be funny? And
Yes.
if there is an attempt to be funny, okay, it was bad and it didn't work. But if there's no intent to be funny,
Right.
then I don't like it. Like my best example, Kathy Griffin, when she
Hmm.
got canceled for holding up that severed head.
Yeah.
Like, where was the humor there?
Yeah.
That's why I was that she's one of the few comics that got canceled that I actually supported the cancellation
Right.
because there was no attempt at being funny. Meanwhile,
Yes.
I've heard other comedians that have gotten in trouble for jokes, and I was like, look, clearly he was trying to, it was clearly a joke. He was clearly trying to be
Yeah.
funny, but for whatever reason, the joke didn't hit. Like Jim
Right.
Jeffries used to say, like, sometimes you tell a joke and it doesn't work. He said it's like it's like a pilot who crashes an airplane. He's like, and you look at him and go, why did you crash the plane? He goes, well, my intention was to land the plane safely,
Right.
but I failed at my job. He said, I didn't wake up that morning going, smash it. Like
Yeah.
it happens. So sometimes I think like before we rush to condemn somebody for a joke,
Right.
let's check and see if there was an intent to be funny there or see where the joke was going. And that's usually what
Yeah.
I do. So whenever I hear an article about someone got canceled over a joke or over a video, the first thing I want to do is show me the video before I give an opinion.
Right.
And I'll watch. And there's times where I've watched the video and I go, yeah, you guys got offended over nothing. This is stupid. And there's other videos I watch where I went, okay, I see y'all's point. So
Mhm.
that's the key thing. Where was there an intent to be funny? Yes or no? And then build from there.
That's good insight. I know. And I want to, I know we have shorter attention span, especially the younger ones. So I want to leave room for people to come and hear you on the 20th. So
Absolutely.
how do people get a hold of you, Benny?
Well, my website is vinnythebooch.com.
Okay.
That's the one-stop shop for everything.
Okay.
On Facebook, I'm Vinny Bucci. In parentheses, it'll say the Booch because that's
Okay.
that was about to be it's a family nickname, but it became my nickname on the regular guys. Everybody called me Booch. Like I walk into a room and everybody's like, Booch, what's up? So
Yeah.
that's there. Twitter, I'm at Vince Bucci.
Okay.
Instagram is at Vinny the Booch Bucci. And at Booch365 on YouTube and TikTok. So those are where to find me on social media. And then also through the website, if you go to the contact list, that'll take you to the Thumbtack link for bookings, or for whatever reason that's not working, I have a direct email and phone number that people can contact if they want to book me for shows and stuff.
Awesome, man. I tell you what, I just knowing the people here, they're already kind of the ones that have seen it in the flip book. They're like, wow, a comedian coming to our place, because we haven't had one, at least in the almost year I've been here. So yeah, they're looking forward to it. And we'll put for our viewers all your links in the show notes. So, if you're driving and you want to be able to get to your information, your phone number, all that, we'll put it in there for you.
Sure.
And so that'll make it easier for anybody that want to have you come and speak and do a routine. That's really good. So we always close with, what insight would you want our viewers to take away from the podcast? Is there anything that you can share with them that would be insightful?
Well, for me, I would always say the best, like the most insightful thing I've always thought about is love what you do.
Yes.
Is probably whatever it is. I mean, I'm trying to choose my words carefully here because I don't want to upset anybody, but I'm like, I don't know at the age of 70, if what exactly everybody's doing there, if they're retired from a business world or whatever, but that's really the most insightful thing I like to give people is to love what you do. So if there's something whatever it is you're doing now, find something enjoyable with your time, whether it's whether anybody there that's still working or if they're not working at all, if there's an activity you guys like to do there, like love whatever it is you're doing. And I always give that advice to people whenever they ask me about, getting into comedy or getting into wrestling or doing something in general. I would always say, if you love it, that's the first step.
Yeah.
As I always say, if you love it, that's the first step, because if you love it, that's what makes you want to do it. Yeah. Even at times when it looks like it's not going to happen. And like I said, I've been doing comedy 17 years. My
Right.
career's gone up, it's gone down, it's gone up, it's gone down. There were so many times where I was in a moment where I was like, okay, this is it. This is the breakthrough moment. I'm going to be the movie star. And something happens. Like, I've had the rug pulled out from underneath me more times than I can count. If there's one word to describe my career, it's perseverance.
Wow.
I've had to persevere through a lot to continue to do this, and that's why I'm blessed. I've been blessed recently with getting a lot of people reaching out to me for shows, especially after the pandemic. I've
Hmm.
had, blessings with, other career choices that I've had and been involved in. And, so I've had great moments along the way, but, like I said, it's gone up and down. And the fact that I love what I do is the reason I continue to do it, even when people have said I should give up. And even when I had the moment in 2019 where I almost did,
Hmm.
but I realized I love this too much and I can't give it up. So
Yeah.
that's what kept me going. So really, that's my best advice. Love what it is. Love what you do.
That is really good. I mean, because I know it is. I won't even add, but I will only, I tell people always have a side gig just for the sake, whatever. But your side gig, you better love it, because when you come home after, say, working 12 hours and you're going to do your side gig, if you don't love something, you ain't going to do it. You
Exactly.
just won't do it. But if you love something, it's just like you're in your zone after a tough day. And so that's really good advice. We appreciate you sharing that with our viewers. And I tell you, again, November 20th, 5 o'clock at Overture. For all the residents, bring your friends, bring your kids, bring anybody that wants to laugh. And I think they're going to be pleasantly surprised. And I know we wanted a comedian to come in and give us a little laughter. So thank you, Vinny, for being a guest on our show. We appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much for having me. And I look forward to seeing you guys on the 20th.
You bet.